Okay. Good evening and welcome to our third class of Decoding the Talmud. In tonight's class, we are going to really do a deep dive into the Talmud. So if you ever really wanted to learn Talmud, tonight is your night. And I just want to, first of all, let's begin with a joke, lighten up a little bit. And we were discussing about eating before Passover. We're going to discuss if you're allowed to eat before Shabbat starts. They say a joke of a mayor, the sheriff from town comes, he knocks on the rabbi's door. It's Friday afternoon. He says, Rabbi. Rabbi says, yes, what can I do? He says, would it be okay if I would stay with you? I want to experience a Shabbat with the community, get to know the neighborhood with pleasure. So the sheriff moves into the house and they go to the synagogue for evening services. After services, the rabbi makes kiddush, and for all those who are at services, he makes some kiddush, and they come home, and he has a whole lavish meal. They make again kiddush, and then they take out the gefilte fish, and he brings out the l'chaims. He pours out a l'chaim, a toast, and then they bring out the chicken soup and another toast. And then by the end of the meal, they're already having their fourth or fifth toast. He goes to sleep a little tipsy, wakes up in the morning. They come to synagogue in the middle of services. He notices, not everyone can sit for so long, so they have a kiddush club. Those that go outside, they have their l'chaims, they have their whiskey. Everyone's drinking, and then the rabbi finishes. They all sit down for their lunch. They're drinking, they're enjoying a l'chaim, a toast, and they're for breaking a whole afternoon. They come at the end of make a second time kiddush, and then at the end of Shabbos, finally everything's over. Make Havdalah, get a glass of wine, and he says to the sheriff, he says, "No, how did you enjoy the experience, the weekend? How was it?" He says, "I'll tell you the truth. I was always wondering, why do the Jews have this law that they shouldn't drive on Shabbat? I think I fully understood why you cannot drive on your Sabbath." Okay, so let's 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 get a quick overview for a moment, because in last week's class we explored the Mishnah, which was X, the core, the form of the Talmud. And beginning with today's lesson and going the next few weeks, we're going to get into the Gemara, the Talmud. And just to explain, to go over again, right? We have the Mishnah was the first text that was written down. Then on that, the rabbis decoded it and discussed it and dissected it. And that was where they got the Gemara. The Gemara is where they learned and they went line by line, as we're going to explain in just a moment, what the Gemara is, and the two together makes the Talmud. So what is the Talmud, right? To get the class of Talmud, you have to first know what the Mishnah is. That's the first part of the Talmud. And the next 4 weeks, we're going to learn what the Gemara is. The Gemara is the second part of the Talmud, okay? So each week is going to give us something different. This week, we're going to learn the body of the Talmud, what is written in the Talmud. Next week, we're going to learn how it was written, the people who wrote it, the history of the Talmud, and a lot more about the Talmud and the two Talmuds. And in the fifth lesson, we're also going to explore the unique nature of the Talmudic thinking and take another deep dive into some of the other parts of the Talmud. So it's very important to understand that maybe we're not going to get to all the answers today, but it's going to be a buildup. And to make it easier, this whole buildup will be on what we studied last week, the original Mishnah from Passover, and the 5 teachings from one Mishnah. So we're going to go through that Mishnah, we're going to dissect it, rip it apart, delve into it, question it, and try to fully understand one Mishnah over 4 weeks. And you're going to see, and we're going to also learn other Mishnahs as we go along, but you're going to see the great depth of Talmud through really chewing over this Mishnah, this teaching of Passover. Okay? So, let's begin by, first of all, if you remember, we We have the second. One moment. Okay. So we have the Mishnah, like you see on the screen. We got the Mishnah, and then with the Gemara, that equals the Talmud. Okay? Now, the the Mishnah rabbis, if you remember last week, who remembers the names of the Mishnaic rabbis? What were they called? Starts with a T.
Tanaim.
Tanaim. There we go. Tanaim. Great. Tanaim was the Mishnaic rabbis. And the Talmud rabbis, if you look on page 77, their name is Amora or Amoraim. Who are these Amoraim? These are the sages that are recorded in the Talmud. They were, for quite a long period of time, even 3 centuries, and they were the ones that interpreted the Mishnah, and they did it through a series of questions and answers. So here's the big thing. The Amoraim, the teachers, for over 300 years, what they basically did was they weren't dissecting halacha, Jewish law. They were dissecting the Mishnah. This is a crucial piece to understand. Because what is Gemara? What is the main body of the Talmud? What is these hundreds and really thousands of pages? It's not Jewish law. It's dissecting the Mishnah. It's almost like a line by line interpretation or letter by letter almost, more than even line by line, and more than even word by word. It's like basically letter by letter of Mishnah. Why did the rabbis of the Mishnah say this word? They could have used that word. Why did they teach that? They should have taught that. And they go through idea by idea by idea, and they do it through question, answer, and back and forth. And this is the body of Gemara. Okay? Now, the Gemara is a compilation of many different books. If you remember, there's 63 books of Mishnah. We spoke about that last week. The Gemara is when you have a full set of Gemara, full set of Talmud, you call it an acronym called the Shas. If you look on 77 in figure 3.1, you see there at the bottom the Shas. What's the Shas? Shas has 2 letters, Shin and Samach, and that means Shisha Sidarim, the 6 orders, the 6 sections. If you remember, there were 6 sections. So this is the abbreviation. This is a very technical term, 6 sections. Okay. Now, you know some of the terminologies of the of a brilliant mind that studies the Mishnah and studies the Gemara. Okay. Now, let's analyze, but before we analyze, let's look back at our original Mishnah, and then we want to turn to page 78, and we want to read over our original Mishnah, which, by the way, is very much a part of the way you learn. And I want to explain it. Part of learning is called chazar. What does chazar mean? It means to repeat. Chazar, to do it over again. Part of learning, whatever we learned in yeshiva, the first 15 minutes of every day was for chazara. You learned over what you learned yesterday. I learned when I was in yeshiva, 14, 15 years old, tractates of Talmud by heart, talking about 80 pages, double-sided, like 160 pages by heart. I was speed tested. I had to answer and continue saying, they asked, what did it say here? And I had to continue repeating word for word what it continued saying. And how did you learn this? First, we learned ideas, and then every single day, I would learn a new page, and repeat over what I learned yesterday. And then when I was doing my finals, the test for a few months, every day, every week, I had to learn 5 pages, what I already learned, and 3 pages new. And like this, I was able to finish the whole tractate of Kiddushin. It was the tractate of marriage. And I learned the whole thing when I was 15 years old. I was tested. I was here learning in high school in Chicago. And like this, and many years we did this. But the idea was Chazara. So let's first do the Chazara. Let's repeat, learn over the Mishnah we learned last week, page 78, text number 1. Sarah, please, can you read it?
One must refrain from eating on the eve of Passover, from close to the time for reciting the Mishah prayers until after darkness has fallen. Even the most destitute person in the Jewish nation should not eat unless he is reclining. He should not be provided with less than 4 cups of wine, even if he is being supplied by the public food bank. When they pour him his first cup of wine, according to Bet Shammai, he should first recite the blessing over the festival and then the blessing over the wine. According to Beit Hillel, he should first recite the blessing over the wine and then the blessing over the festival.
Thank you. So this is the Mishnah we studied last week, 5 points. And we have the idea that before Passover, close to the Mincha, you shouldn't eat until it's nightfall. Even a poor person shouldn't eat unless he's reclining. Don't give him less than 4 cups of wine, even if he's taking for the charity. And the argument between Beisham is, which blessing you make first? Do you first make the Bar Priagafen first, or do you first make the holiday blessing first? That's the argument. Okay. And now let's put on our Talmud hat. Okay? So let's analyze this for a moment. I want to ask everyone here. Feel free, if you're on Zoom, unmute yourself. You can call out. Please share with us. Do you have anything that you think is questionable from these 5 that the Talmud might dissect and ask? Yes. Anyone? Okay, if people don't like alcohol, do you need to drink it? All right, you can have grape juice, by the way, but ideally it's supposed to be wine, right? All right, all right. The question is if grape juice is a wine. Very good. Is grape juice considered a wine? Okay, next.
Can you make wine from apples?
Okay, Alan's asking, can you make wine from apples? All right, some of the text itself. Other questions? That's a good one. Let's think of some others.
Since Beit Hillel, Beit Shammai say opposite things, who should you go by?
So you have 2 different opinions. Which one do you go by? Okay. Which one is the Jewish law? Anyone on Zoom? Anyone wants to unmute? Feel free. Yeah. What would be a Talmudic question? Some of these ideas. Okay. Why do we drink 4 cups? Why not 5 cups? Why not 3 cups? Very good. Okay. What does it mean reclining? You're reclining. You're laying back on a reclining chair. You lean to the right, to the left. Very good. Okay.
Yeah, one of the other questions is, how do you define a cup? How much is a cup?
What is a cup? Okay. All right. Any others? What does it mean before darkness? What is darkness? Is it by sunset? Is it when it's 3 stars go out? What is darkness? You shouldn't eat before it gets dark. Very good. That's a good one. Okay. Yeah.
Does that mean we start reading the Haggadah before darkness?
Does that mean you can't read the Haggadah? Well, if you can't start the Kiddush, you can't read the Haggadah either, right? Kaddish is the first thing. The Haggadah is the Magid.
But if it's eating, does that mean you also can't drink?
Oh, so it says about eating, doesn't mean it's about drinking. Very good, okay. In general, the idea of eating and drinking is the same. We combine the 2, yeah. But just to answer your question, Peggy, you cannot start the Seder until it's dark outside. 3 stars come out. It says less than 4 cups. How many? Can you maybe give him more than 4 cups? Okay. You want to give him even more than 4 cups. Okay. All right. These are all good points. Is he? Anyone else? Michael, Brian? Yeah. Okay. Let me give you a few other, Talmudic questions that asked on this Mishnah. Well, another one is, why does this only apply to Passover? Why do we say Passover? Why not on Shabbos? Why not on another holiday? Shavuos, Rosh Hashanah, right? Why just Passover? So that's question number one. On the second point, uh, like Ari said, what does it mean recline? What is the definition of reclining? Very good. The third part is, this is the one that you probably want to think of. Well, when it says that 4 cups, especially in the Talmudic times, and up until a few hundred years ago, there's something called demons, shadim. And the rabbis are very nervous about shadim, demons. And therefore, they said you shouldn't have peers. You should never have peers, because peers attracts demons. King Solomon. No, peers means 2. 2, 4, 6, 8. Have you ever heard that? Raise your hand. Have you ever heard of the idea of cooking eggs? You shouldn't cook eggs in even numbers. You should cook eggs in odd numbers. 3, 5. No, we always grew up this way. You cook eggs, you put in 3 eggs. You put 1 egg. You don't put 2 eggs or 4 eggs. You always put an odd number of eggs when you're cooking eggs. Okay. This is where it comes from. Because
Put one by one.
what?
You put one and then add another one.
Yeah, but when you're cooking, if it goes up to an even number, it's like you're gonna get distracted. But today we don't have this concept. It's away from the world. Demons, but the famous King Solomon and the demons, Ashmedai, and throughout the ages there was all these stories. So the Talmud says, "How are you allowed to drink 4 cups? That's peers. That's 2 plus 2. That's 4. You shouldn't do that. You should do 3 or 5." So whenever the Talmud has the answers, we drink them separately. It's 4 different times, 4 different blessings. It's not really considered 4 different answers. The Talmud says that night of Passover is a night of protection. God's protecting the Jewish people. But anyway, that's another question the Talmud asks. Okay, here's another question. The Talmud says that if a poor person is going to get food from the community, you should give him 4. Isn't that obvious? Why shouldn't you give him 4? He also needs to have 4. Why do you even say that you should give him 4? The Talmud's going to give an answer. The Talmud answered that because he's poor and he's receiving money, there is an idea that Rabbi Akiva advised poor people not to take too much charity, so you shouldn't want to take too much. So therefore, you might think, oh, he shouldn't take 4 cups. He could take 1 cup. He could take 3 cups, 2 cups. He shouldn't have to take. He doesn't want to take from the charity so much. So this we learn now in Passover, give him everything. And then the next question is, which is the argument between Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel, is what's the reason between these 2 opinions? Why do they have 2 opinions? Why don't they both agree? This one has one logic, the other one has a different logic, and we want to understand both of their logics. This is a very, very common thing. If you have 2 opinions in a Mishnah, the Talmud, the Gemara will then dissect both opinions and want to give the reasonings for both opinions, where it came from, and what reason it might be better and stronger, so you can come to what would be the actual law. Okay. So this is a classic Gemara dissecting, ripping apart, discussing a Mishnah. Clear? Any questions? Okay. Now, before we get into the nitty-gritty and really ripping apart a Mishnah, we are going to first bring in a very, very important concept, and that is what's called a brisa. Okay, so the brisa, this is very important. If you look at page 82, you see the key term brisa. The Braitha literal meaning is external material, and this is very important. This is from the same period of time as the Mishnah, for the same rabbis that are written in the Mishnah. However, there was tens of thousands of teachings from those rabbis, and only a few thousand were incorporated in the 63 books of Mishnah. There's, right? The Rabbi Yehuda, the prince, as we spoke last week, chose and he put in unique and special teachings. He didn't just take every teaching. He discussed the teachings. He took them apart and he learned them over. So Rabbi Yehuda, the prince, he went through all the different teachings and he chose certain teachings should be in the Mishnah and certain ones he didn't put in. And the ones that he didn't put in, but were part of all the tens of thousands of teachings, those are called the brises. So they're from the same rabbis, for the same period of times as these Mishnah rabbis, these few hundred years of rabbis, right? However, they weren't put and they weren't chosen to be put in the Mishnah, which teaches us a few very important things. They weren't 100% verified. You have a teaching of a brisa, but perhaps it wasn't 100% verified. So maybe it's 100% accurate. Maybe it's just 99% accurate. A Mishnah is 100% accurate. This was vetted and discussed and dissected. And Rabbi Yehuda the prince, together with the rabbis with him, put it into the Mishnah. Put this into the book that we have for eternity. But the brisa, these were teachings, but not all of them. Maybe they weren't written down in 100% in the accuracy. Because, many people can have different brises. People can come and say, I have a brisa. Who told you that brisa? We don't know. But I have this tradition written, from the rabbis. So they could be from the same time, but it wasn't 100% vetted. However, it does have a greater strength over the Gemara. The Gemara rabbis came later, came after the Mishnah, came after the brises. So the Gemara rabbis can't really argue on the brisa unless they have someone from the Mishnah times or a different brisa that equals up to their point. So you'll have keeping us going here. So you have the Mishnah and the Barisos. These are from the same period of times. And the Gemara, and a rabbi that's written in the Gemara usually cannot argue on something that's stated in a Mishnah or in a Barisa unless they have another Mishnah or another Barisa that equals up to their point.
Were the prices written down?
And the Barises, many of them were written down. Yeah. Some of them were just told over. Yeah. Correct. Okay. So let's see it over here on the screen. Yeah. Barisa means something that's on the outside. From the same time, we have the Mishnah is the way we say in Hebrew. The Mishnah and the Brisa is also two different wordings. One is Tanan, which is we taught because the rabbis themselves taught it, and it was also well known. And the Brisa is it was taught because we don't know exactly who taught it, and the Brisa was also less commonly known. It wasn't dissected and given out, and also the Brisa has many different opinions in it. It can have the same idea, let's say the same idea about Passover, but you can have a few different Brisas about it, meaning a few different teachings on this idea about Passover. So you could have, in our Mishnah, we had two opinions whether to make the blessing, right? And we had only one. We didn't have the reasoning. Maybe the Brisa will give us the reasoning, right? Or maybe the Brisa will tell us when is close to the Mincha. What time is close to the Mincha, right? Is it 2 p.m.? Is it 3 p.m.? When's the mincha? The mincha's afternoon. What's close to afternoon, right? So there could be brises that will give us the Torah. Brises can give us more information, basically. Okay, it can give us more context to one idea that's brought in the Mishnah. Okay, so that's another important idea. Let's see your text number 2, page 82. Thank you.
Amoraim, who came after Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, had much need for these baraitot. The baraitot helped them extract many profound ideas that were recorded in the Mishnah in extremely succinct language, captured in hints and broad statements. Using these baraitot, the Amoraim were able to extrapolate, develop fresh insight, and extract secondary derivations from the Mishnah's law.
Thank you. Okay, and then the baraitot will give us different reasonings for different opinions that are mentioned in Mishnah. We're going to see also lesson number 5, how the Gemara uses baraitos to clarify the meaning of a Mishnah by supplying it in important context and different ideas. We're going to see that more. But here's an example we're going to get into right now, and we'll watch a video of it, okay, of the Gemara using a brisa to clarify, to interpret a Mishnah. We mentioned, if you remember earlier, that there's the dispute between Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel, the yeshiva of Shammai and the yeshiva of Hillel, when to make the blessings. Okay? So let's see now, we're going to see a brisa that will help us with understanding this argument. Okay? So let's watch
The world is conducted with divine attention to each detail. The Creator expects similar precision in our Torah observance. Even sequencing is significant. The Passover night meal begins with Kiddush, blessings recited over wine. Wine. We thank God for creating grapes that enable wine production. Festival. We thank God for sanctifying us as His people and giving us His sacred laws and joyous festivals, including Passover, the season of our freedom. Occasion. We thank God for keeping us alive to experience this occasion. Shabbat. If it's a Saturday night, we thank God for illuminating fire and the separate roles of Shabbat and weekdays. In the first century, the Jewish sages debated the sequence of the blessings. Their debate appears in a Baraita, a text that records rabbinic teachings from the Mishnaic era. The debate was between two academies, Bet Hillel and Bet Shammai, founded by two great sages of the 1st century BCE. Bet Shammai says, first recite the festival blessing and then thank God for wine. Bet Hillel says, that's backwards. First recite the wine blessing and then thank God for the festival. Now, the Baraita transcript also records their logic. Bet Shammai hooks two logical weights to its view. Number 1, wine is an unusual way to begin a meal. We go straight for the cup on Passover night only to honor God's festival. So, the festival causes the requirement for wine, and the festival should have priority. That makes sense, but Bet Hillel has a comeback. Agreed, the festival is primary to the wine. But we are now focused on the Kiddush, and it's the wine that causes the Kiddush. No wine, no Kiddush. So we begin with the wine blessing. But wait, Bet Shammai are not done. Number 2, when you receive a gift, you say thank you. Here we have 2 gifts, a sanctified time and beautiful wine. Which arrives first? Passover begins at sunset, long before our nighttime meal. Shouldn't we express gratitude for the first gift before thanking God for the second gift? Can Bet Hillel counter that argument? Certainly. Why look at the context of a few hours to find the correct sequence? That's ignoring a major principle, the rule of frequency. Let me give you an example. Jewish males wear a talit for prayers. They also wear tefillin. Which of these items is put on first? The answer is the talit. Why? The rule of frequency. How often is a talit worn? Every day. How often are tefillin worn? On weekdays only, not on Shabbat or festivals. So we bow to frequency and put on the talit first. Getting back to Passover, which is more frequent, wine drinking or Passover? You can drink wine several times a day and recite hundreds of wine blessings a year. But Passover Eve is once a year. There are only 3 annual festivals and 50-odd Shabbats. The rule of frequency favors the wine. The final decision of Jewish law was set in favor of Bet Hillel. We begin with a brief thanks for the wine and move on to a long, beautiful blessing for Passover and for the precision-filled role we play in God's greater plan.
All right. So, all right, just as you were watching in the video, here's some of the ideas between the 2 opinions between Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel, why the wine would come first, blessing, the Bor Piragafen, or why the day blessing would come first. By the way, this is the same discussion on Shabbat. Every Friday night, do you first say Bor Piragafen and then make the blessing on Shabbat? Or do you first make the blessing on Shabbat and then the Bor Piragafen? And we all know we first make the Bor Piragafen first, right? And then we say the second blessing, which is on the Kadesh Shabbat, sanctifying Shabbos. The same discussion they also have. So you have these 2 opinions, okay? So the Gemara, the Talmud, will dissect, and there's a brisa that gave them the reasoning behind both of their opinions, and that is a classic brisa. Okay, now.
The answer then to the question of Beit Shammai or
The brisa will explains to us the reasonings behind their opinions, right? Gives us a reason behind Beit Shammai's opinion, why he thought this way. So our Mishnah just said what it is. Our Mishnah didn't give us all the reasonings. But then the rabbi said, oh, we have a brisa, another teaching that gives us a little more interesting information. So the Gemara quotes that brisa, and it gives us more information of what's their reasoning. So this is classic in the Gemara. It will quote us different brisas, different additional teachings that give us more reasonings to our Mishnah.
The picture he had up on the screen, it looked like the underline saying this is the answer. It looked like that was in the Mishnah, though. It was in the center of the page.
Alan was asking on the video, it was circling around different texts. And I was quoting that Mishnah from the Gemara, that teaching, that brisa that the Gemara quotes. That's what it was circling.
The price is quoted in the Gemara, right?
Correct. The brisa is quoted in the Gemara. Yeah, the brisa is quoted in the Gemara, and it gives us additional background and meaning to the text of our Mishnah. Okay, clear?
I assume, though, since Rabbi Shammai was already dead, he's not going to change his opinion. He's going to keep with his way.
We're gonna get to that. So I was saying, will Shammai change his opinion? First, it wasn't Shammai; it was his yeshiva.
Okay.
He himself at Hillel only had very few arguments, but the yeshivas had many arguments. But it's just a side point. Many people think that the 2 of them argued a lot, and the actual reality is that they didn't argue so much, but their yeshivas, their schools argued a lot. Okay, but we'll see soon also how it's not a problem if you went according to Shammai's opinion until the law was enacted, and that's what we go according to. Because let's see it soon. Okay. So now that we understand a little bit of what a brisa, an idea of a brisa, let's confuse you one more time until we fully confuse you. Let's explain one more key term. Okay, turn to page 89. 89, okay? You see key term 3.3? This is called a sugya. You see the word sugya? Sugya means a Talmudic discussion, not just giving us an information. This is the reason, rather a whole discussion, a back and a forth, and questioning it, and then going backwards and forward, and another question, right? Almost like you ever go and you play a tennis. You know, you play, the ball comes this way, then the ball comes that way, then I hit the ball that way, and I get the ball that way, then I get the ball that way, that, right? That's called a sugya. That's a sugya. Sometimes a sugya in Talmud could go for pages. Sometimes it could go for a short amount of time. In our Gemara, in our Talmud that we're going to learn now, we're going to learn a sugya. We're going to learn an actual discussion of Talmud, the way the Talmud takes one line of a Mishnah and it will challenge it by asking it this way, and then going back the other way, and then back the other way, and back the other way, and then another way. And it sounds a little confusing. We can try to make it as clear as possible. I would suggest that you have a pen or pencil handy if you like to write it. If you need one, feel free. If you're on Zoom, feel free to get one. And it's just 22 lines in the whole Talmud, in the whole Gemara, 160 words. But we're going to dissect it and get through it. And what we're going to really try to understand is, who is the rabbi that taught this Mishnah? Which rabbi taught this Mishnah? We're going to bring a Baraisa that has two rabbis, two names of two great rabbis, that taught the same thing that our Mishnah taught, or similar, but different. And we're going to try to understand which one is our Mishnah. Or maybe it's none of them. Or maybe it's both of them. So we're going to try to understand. Okay? That's what we're going to get into. Okay? Now, which part of our Mishnah? Here again, there's a few different parts of our Mishnah. The part of our Mishnah we're going to dissect is going to be the opening line. The opening line, which is that you must refrain from eating on the eve of Passover from close to the time of reciting the Mincha prayers until after darkness has fallen. And what we're going to want to understand is, what does it mean, the Mincha prayer? What is the Mincha hour? Is it 3 o'clock in the afternoon, 3:30? Usually we say it's about 2.5 hours before sundown. Okay? So what is the right time? And we're going to dissect it. But before we can really dissect this, you need to understand one final key term. One final key term. We're learning a lot of key terms here. And hopefully you're following along. This final key term is, on page 90, the word diuk. Diuk. Diuk means precision, which means a very, very important thing. Instead of me trying to interpret it to you, let's read it for the great teacher, Rabbi Adin Steinsaltz, who was the first one to translate the Talmud. He was a Chabad rabbi, unfortunately passed away during COVID a few years ago. Great, brilliant mind, who translated the whole Talmud, and he himself didn't grow up religious, but in his older age, I think he was in his 20s or something, became religious. A brilliant mind. Let's see what he says. Page 91, text 4. Aaron, will you read it first?
Our magazine called him a once Millennium Scholar. All right. So every word of the Mishnah was precisely weighed and measured. Hence, even the most far-reaching conclusions may be drawn not only from the wording of the Mishnah, but also from the way it uses language, from expressions that the Mishnah could have used but did not use, and from the order in which things are mentioned. All these elements comprise the basis for the characteristic Talmudic study called Dina, precision.
So this is a very, very, very important idea to understand. And that is like this, that every single word that's written, or every word that's not written, is precise. You don't just say, they're having a conversation. Oh, it's Passover, so it's the book of Passover, so they said the word on the eve of Passover. Or maybe they didn't mean Passover, they meant every Shabbos, every eve of Shabbos. They meant every eve of Jewish holidays. No, the fact that it says the word Passover is specific. The fact that they didn't say all other holidays is also specific. Like we said last week, right? The joke of the mother who says, "Oh, I gave you 2 sweatshirts. You didn't like the other. Put on that today." Like, I'm just wearing this one today. Like tomorrow. No. The fact that you are wearing this one today means that you do not like the other one. That's what the rabbi is saying. The fact that the rabbi write this word is because they mean this word. They don't mean another word. And you might think to yourself, "Oh, what do you make yourself crazy? Go and discuss and spend hours dissecting and talking about an idea if it means before Passover, it means before Shabbos, what is before? Is before 3 hours, is before 3.5 hours, is before this is it that rabbi that it means. Don't make yourself crazy. But this is a premise that you need to accept. If you accept this, you can continue learning and you can appreciate Talmud. If you don't accept that the rabbis really meant every word they said, and by the way, the same is true of the Torah 10 times fold. Some people say, the Torah didn't mean it. Doesn't apply today, 21st century. We change things, whatever. And the Torah said this word, it didn't really mean this word, it meant the other word. Every word is exact. Every word is meant to be there. Every word is written specifically, and it's precise. They chose the words. So if the Mishnah was chosen so precise, of course also the Torah was chosen extremely precise. Okay? So this is another very important thing to accept and agree to, that the Mishnah is going to always be very precise. And it's important for this week. It's going to be important for next week also, and the week after. Because you're going to see, we're going to try to dissect and really appreciate. And by the way, that's what we do in yeshiva. If you go to any yeshiva, and what are they sitting and discussing for hours? They're discussing deal. They're discussing this idea. Why was this word you chosen? Why did they choose this word? And by the way, not just a Mishnah, also in Talmud. And not even in the Talmud, even in the commentators of Talmud. Did Rashi choose this word? Rashi could have said it with a different word, or he didn't have to say anything. I can't tell you how many times I sat in yeshiva, and the whole class for 2 hours was why did Rashi say this extra word? For 2 hours discussing why did Rashi, a commentator of the Talmud, use this one word? He didn't have to use that word. And trying to understand what was Rashi's brilliance by adding this one word. And with that one word, he taught us another 100 things, whatever, etc. Okay, so let's jump right in. But one more thing just to point out. You might think to yourself and say, maybe if we're talking about Jewish law, I want to know. It's the law, so you're going to dissect it, you're going to dissect it, this every detail. But every year, we're going to discuss which rabbi taught the law. Like, come on, you make yourself crazy. Which rabbi taught the law? And what time exactly? But that's, if you remember in the first lesson, one of the main points we brought out in the first lesson was that when we're studying Talmud, and everyone here in the room is not lawyers, we said. We have a few lawyers, but most people are not lawyers. And we said, well, now we understand that Talmud is not just about law, and it's not just for lawyers, it's dissecting the Mishnah and understanding it. And we're going to see more how Talmud is even more than law, right? But the point that we brought out was that Talmud study is not about the studying of Talmud. It's about understanding the way God thinks. You remember that? in the first class? It's understanding the way God's brain works. We want to understand God. We want to connect to God. So that's what it is. So when we're dissecting diuk, when we're trying to understand every single letter, word, and nuance, it's because we want to understand completely the way God just thinks. And that's one of the biggest points of here, that when we're learning it, even if it might be something that you'll say to yourself, this is so not relevant. That's specifically it. We're not trying to learn the relevant things. It's not about the relevant, it's about me. It's about what does God think? How does God understand? And that's what it really is. Okay? So what we're gonna jump now in is to understand when is the mincha hour, when is you can't appetite yourself, and which rabbis. So let's begin by bringing a brisa. We're going to bring a brisa that is quoted. This is now copy paste from the Talmud. We're going to have a few texts one by one. We're going to go it over, dissect it, talk it over together, and we will be able to appreciate this full Mishnah by dissecting through different brisas, and the brisas will dissect line by line, word by word, the words of our Mishnah. Okay, so let's start from text 5. This is the question of the Talmud, and the Talmud is going to try to ask it by bringing in a brisa. So page 92 is the now very, very important to follow along from now on. Follow along, and when we say Yiddish is haltka, which means try to keep your mind to it. You know, keep your mind, don't lose.
Why does it specify the eve of Passover? Even the eve of Shabbat and other festivals also trigger this prohibition. For we learned in our Braita, one should not eat on the eves of Shabbat or festivals from the time of Mincha and onward, so that one enters Shabbat or the festivals with an appetite. This is the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. Conversely, Rabbi Yosef says that one may continue eating until it grows dark.
Okay, so let's go over this Braita, which let's talk it over for just a moment. The Gemara brings here a Braita that tells us an argument between two Tanoim, which means two rabbis from the Mishnah. Okay, there's Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yossi. Remember those two names, and you're gonna have to remember them until the end. There's Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yossi, two great rabbis. Okay, Rabbi Yehuda says that you're not allowed to eat on the eve of not just Passover, but of every Shabbat, every holiday. And Rabbi Yossi allowed to eat on every holiday and every Shabbat until the holiday starts. The Gemara now assumes that the Mishnah must be the opinion of who? Which opinion? Rabbi Yossi or Rabbi Yehuda? Who do you think? Who would the Gemara assume the opinion should be like? Rabbi Yehuda. Very good, according to the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda, who says you're not allowed to eat, because Rabbi Yossi doesn't even believe that the prohibition of eating before the holiday. So the Mishnah must be according to Rabbi Yehuda's opinion. So based on this assumption, the Gemara is going to ask, why does the Mishnah only speak about the eve of Passover? Rabbi Yehuda's opinion is all days, not just Passover, also Shabbos and also holidays. So why does the Mishnah say an eve of Passover? If the Mishnah is according to Rabbi Yehuda's opinion, then the Mishnah shouldn't have said on the eve of Passover. The Mishnah should have said on the eve of Shabbat and holidays, right? So now you can turn to page 92, and if you can take a moment and fill in the chart, okay? Fill in the chart based upon our understanding until now. Let's do this. This will help you. Take a moment, take out a pen, and fill it in, right? According to Rabbi Yehuda, if you also like to look on the screen, you can look on the screen. According to Rabbi Yehuda, right, we have on the eve of Passover, you cannot eat. On the eve of Shabbat, holidays you cannot either eat. According to Rabbi Yossi, you could eat both times. Yes and yes. Okay? So who does our Mishnah follow? It's the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. Okay. So you could circle, if you like, you can make a little circle in this place by Rabbi Yehuda's name. Right? That's up until now, we think that the Mishnah is going according to Rabbi Yehuda's opinion. Huh?
But he's only referring to other holidays besides Passover.
One second, he doesn't say Rabbi Yossi. I was asking, maybe it's Rabbi Yossi's opinion. He doesn't say Passover. He doesn't say holidays. Maybe he's talking about all things. So seemingly, our Mishnah, which says you shouldn't eat, should be according to Rabbi Yehuda's opinion, which also says you shouldn't eat. That's the original way that the Gemara is thinking. That seemingly it should be Rabbi Yehuda's opinion who says that you shouldn't eat. And the Gemara is asking the question, why Passover if it's the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, then Rabbi Yehuda's opinion is all holidays, not just Passover. So that's the first way the Gemara understands.
Does Rabbi Yossi then say you can eat before Passover?
Seemingly Rabbi Yossi says yes, you can eat it, right? Seemingly, up until this moment, Rabbi Yossi, we think that Rabbi Yossi says you could eat before Passover starts. Okay, but now let's see the answer of the Talmud. The answer of the Talmud is going to bring one of the rabbis from the Talmud times, who we call him an Amora. Remember, that was the first key term that we learned today. An Amora, one of the most famous ones, and his name is Rav Huna. Rav Huna, that was the name of one of the great rabbis during the Talmud times. And let's see text number 6. Rav Huna's opinion, page 93. Out.
Rav Huna said, this distinction between Passover and Shabbat or the other festivals is necessary for Rabbi Yosef, who said, one may continue eating until it grows dark. That will apply to the eve of Shabbat and other festivals, but on the eve of Passover, he will concede that it is prohibited due to the obligation to eat matzah.
Yeah. So what does Rabbi Huna say? Rabbi Huna gives us 2 solutions to our problem. Okay? And this is very important to understand the way Diak works, the way the Gemara could dissect and understand it. Right? The Brisa introduces 2 sages who disputed this matter. And neither of them seem to make the distinction between Passover and all the other days of the year, Shabbat and other holidays. Rabbi Yehuda prohibits eating always. Rabbi Yossi seems to allow eating always. And Rabbi Huna gives us 2 solutions. He says that Rabbi Yossi is in fact the opinion that our Mishnah follows. Rabbi Huna says, we assumed that Rabbi Yossi thought to say that even before Passover you could eat. Rabbi Huna says no. Rabbi Yossi says if it's only Shabbat and holidays you can eat. Well, Passover you cannot eat. Passover is different than all other days. And Rabbi Huna argues that this assumption to our question was based on what we may have wrong. But once you adopt this new assumption, that there's a difference between Passover and the rest of the days of the year, and you understand that Rabbi Yossi would permit eating on Shabbat holidays, but he doesn't permit on Passover. Okay? Why? Because matzah. Because matzah is special, a special mitzvah. The matzah, you want to eat it to be the if you're already full stomach, you're going to your Seder, what's already the matzah? You know what I mean? It's not so delicious. But if you're hungry and you're waiting for it, the whole joke that they say, I don't want to get distracted, but of a non-Jewish beggar that wanted to taste a Jewish steak, they heard about the brisket, he came, and they first gave him a cup of wine, then they give him some vegetable to dip into salt water, and then they read a story for 3 hours, and they finally give him a cracker, matzah, he can't even bite it, and they give him more bitter herbs by itself, and he's choking, and then more matzah with the bitter herbs, and he runs out of the house, and he says, these Jews are crazy, and he makes his friend the next day, he says, you would have waited one more minute, you would have gotten the brisket. So you need to enjoy the matzah. The matzah is special. So that's the distinction. So this Rav Huna, this is the second way of learning our Mishnah. So now look on page 93, the next chart, 3.4. You can fill it in. According to Rabbi Yehuda, could you eat on the eve of Passover? No. Could you eat on the eve of the holidays? No. According to Rabbi Yossi, you can write this in. Write in the words no, or make an X. According to Rabbi Yossi, could you eat on Passover? No. Could you eat on Shabbat on the holidays? Yes. So in this way, according to Rabbi Yehuda, who does our Mishnah go like? Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yossi? Which one? Rabbi Yossi. Very good. Rabbi Yossi. Okay, so circle Rabbi Yossi. Now we're going to bring the other way. Right? Remember, Talmud goes one way and the other way.
Why they decided Rabbi Yossi?
He explained. Right?
That's the only reason.
He's explaining why our Mishnah makes sense very well according to Rabbi Yossi. Right? Rabbi Yehuda said clearly you can't eat before any holiday and any Shabbat. That's not our Mishnah. Rabbi Yossi just said you could eat. But when he said you could eat, he didn't mean also Passover. He just said holidays because there's many holidays. There's Shavuos, there's Sukkos, there's Rosh Hashanah, right? So, but he didn't mean Passover, of course. So we want to explain that Rabbi Yossi didn't mean Passover. So Rabbi Yehuda gave us the logic of Rabbi Yossi.
But why is this logic better than the logic of Rabbi Yehuda?
Well, let's see in a moment. So let's see. Now we're going to come to the next logic. And this is Rav Papa. So text number 7 is going to give us the other way of thinking. Maybe, no, our Mishnah is not Rabbi Yossi. Maybe our Mishnah is Rabbi Yehuda. It's a different way of thinking, the opposite way. So let's see. Text number 7, the opposite way of thinking, page 94.
We can explain the Mishnah in a way that conforms with Rabbi Yehuda's view. The distinction between Passover and other occasions in the in the case of the eve of Shabbat and other festivals, the prohibition is enforced from the time of Mishnah and onward. However, in proximity to the time of Mishnah, it is still permitted. Conversely, on the eve of Passover, the prohibition comes into force even during the time that is proximate to the Mishnah, shortly prior to Mincha, shortly prior to Mincha.
Let me explain that. Over here. Okay. So, here we are. Bring it on the screen. Okay. This is the first opinion. Now let's go to the next one. So, our Mishnah that tells us, our Mishnah, Rav Papa says that you wanted to say is Rabbi Yossi. Why are you saying it's Rabbi Yossi? Rav Papa says you said Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Yossi didn't even make any distinction between Passover and the Jewish holiday. That was just an assumption that you were thinking. But Rabbi Yehuda, he actually said the words of our Mishnah. He said you're not allowed to eat. So therefore you're saying Rabbi, and you're saying Rabbi Yehuda is not our Mishnah. Maybe it could be Rabbi Yehuda, could be our Mishnah. Rav Papa says. Because let's look carefully at the text of the Brisa, and let's look carefully at the text of our Mishnah. What does the Brisa say? What's the wording of the Brisa? The wording of the Brisa is from the time of Mincha. From the time of Mincha. What's the wording of the Mishnah? From close to the time of Mincha. It adds the word close to the time of Mincha. There's the time of Mincha, and there's close to the time of Mincha. The time of Mincha is 3:30, 2.5 hours before sunset. Close to the time of Mincha is 30 minutes before. We always say close, you give a 30-minute period. Many places, the idea of close is an added 30 minutes. So maybe he says, very simple, throughout Shabbat and the whole year, when can't you eat? From the time of Mincha, every Friday afternoon, 2.5 hours before sunset, 3:30, let's say, if Shabbat starts, whatever it is, you can't eat. On Passover, you add another half an hour earlier. It's like this, you're a little hungry. That's the distinction. And that's very simple. So the whole year, and this is very simple. This is Rabbi Yehuda's opinion. Rabbi Yehuda is the one that clearly said, you're not allowed to eat before the holidays, before Shabbat. This makes much more sense, Papa says, because Rabbi Yossi says you're allowed to eat the whole year and all the holidays. He didn't say Passover. Rabbi Yehuda is the one that said you can never eat. You can never eat, not at Shabbat, not on holidays. And in Passover, there's the added point that not only you can't eat for the time of the Mincha, but even when it's close to the time of Mincha, 3 o'clock, added 30 more minutes earlier, you can't eat. So now, let's go to our next exercise box, 3.5, page 94. Fill it in. According to Rabbi Yehuda, on the eve of Passover, you're not allowed to eat from 3 p.m. You can write that in. No, from 3 p.m. And on the Shabbat and the holidays, it's from 3:30. According to Rabbi Yossi, you can always eat. Passover, holidays, you can always eat. No problem at all. Who is our Mishnah like? Our Mishnah is like Rabbi Yehuda, who says the opinion of our Mishnah. Our Mishnah added on the point that not only from the time of Mincha, but even close to the time of Mincha, which is 3 o'clock. So far clear? Okay. Now it's going to get a little more confusing. Okay? Huh? So Larissa is asking, why did we dismiss? We dismissed it because we have a different logic. We have it the opposite way. And this way, seemingly, it makes much more sense. If you do the diuk, if you look at the exact wording, the wording says very clear. One says the word close, and one says from the time. So it makes much more sense. Close is Passover. Passover, you add on another 30 minutes. And the whole year, it's just that exact time. So it makes much more sense. And it makes much more sense. And it'll go according to Rabbi Yehuda's opinion. Because Rabbi Yehuda is the one that clearly said that you can't eat. Rabbi Yossi was the one that said you could eat. So it makes Rav Papa is saying it makes much more sense to say that it's Rabbi Yehuda's opinion is our Mishnah.
Huna says quantified what the Rabbi Yosef meant, and I assume that's going forward. So why do we still have a check mark there? We should have
Rav Huna's opinion. I was asking about Rav Huna's opinion. Once Rav Papa argued with him, Rav Papa asked back Rav Huna. He said, Rav Huna, why are you saying it's Rabbi Yossi? Doesn't make sense, it's Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Yossi says you're allowed to eat. And he never said you're allowed to eat before, he never said you're not allowed to eat before Passover. He said you're always allowed to eat. So why are you saying Rabbi Yossi says you're not allowed to eat before Passover? Rav Papa says it makes much more sense to say that our Mishnah is Rabbi Yehuda's opinion. It's not Rabbi Yossi's opinion. So he knocks it away. So now, where we're holding in the Talmud, our Mishnah is not like Rabbi Yossi. Our Mishnah is like the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda that says you're not allowed to eat. And Rabbi Yossi says you are allowed to eat. So our Mishnah follows Rabbi Yehuda. All this could sound good, but there's a problem. The problem is that we have a second brisa. We don't just have one brisa, we have a second brisa. Okay? We got to go through this a little quicker. I see time is giving us The clock is ticking. So let's read the next parsa. Okay, Alan, page 95.
On the eve of Shabbat, eating is permitted in proximity to the time of Mincha. Surely we learn the contrary in a brisa. One may not eat on the eve of Shabbos or festivals from the 9th hour onward, so that they enter Shabbat with an appetite. That is the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. However, Rabbi Yosef maintains that one may continue eating until it grows dark.
Oh my gosh, what did you just see here? How insane is that? Right? We have a second brisa that clearly says Rabbi Yehuda's opinion is from 3 p.m. He says 9. He says 9 hours into the day, which is 3 p.m. He doesn't say 3:30, doesn't say 9.5 hours. Right? So clearly, Rabbi Yehuda doesn't say make this distinction between Passover and the whole year. He says the whole year is it's close to Mincha. The whole year, Shabbat and holidays, it's from 3 p.m., not from 3:30. Yes, Ari? The 9th hour means the 9th hour into the day. So from when the day starts, the day has 12 hours, right? So 9 hours into the day. Let's say 3:30. Yeah, let's say it starts at 6. We always say 6 hour, yes, 6 a.m. till 6 p.m.
It's the daytime.
Yeah. Yeah, we average it out, right? Okay. 9 hours, we're talking about on average, right? It doesn't matter. Exact. It could be 4 p.m., you know what I mean? And every day, the winter, the summer, everything is different.
I have a
Yes.
question, but where does he derive 9 hours from? There's nothing that specifies that. So where does that come from?
So where's the general concept of 9 hours from, right?
Yes, right.
Okay, that's a good question. That's a side question. Let's get that soon. I want to just finish it up. Okay, just hold that thought for a moment. Okay, but now according to the second brisa, we just totally knocked out Reb Papa's idea. Reb Papa gave us this whole brilliant idea. Close, or actually, or we put another brisa that clearly says that Rabbi Yehuda's opinion is for 9 hours. So it must be. So now go to 95, exercise 3.6. According to Rabbi Yehuda, when can't you eat a Passover? You cannot eat from 3 p.m. And on Shabbat in the whole year, also from 3 p.m. According to Rabbi Yossi, now we must go back to our original opinion, right? Which is Rabbi Yossi's is our Mishnah. Rabbi Yossi would say you can't eat on the eve of Passover, but on the holidays, the whole year you could eat. And who is our Mishnah like? Rabbi Yossi. Comes a rabbi, he ran into the study hall and he started screaming and shouting. You're saying? Text number 9. Jack, you want to read first text number 9?
Marzutra said, who can tell us whether this baraita is accurate? Perhaps it is erroneous.
So Marzutra comes and says, this is a Mishnah, brisa. A brisa was teaching that not every single word is exact. Maybe over time, broken telephone. Maybe they missed a word 9.5 hours. Maybe they missed a word half. They wrote 9 hours. Maybe they just missed the word a half hour.
Maybe it was close to 9 hours.
Yeah. Marzutra says, how do you know that that brisa is accurate? And if you have that, then if you go according to Marzutra, then everything can go back to the way we thought about it originally, which would be that a Mishnah is like Rabbi Yehuda, that it would be Passover, it's close to Mincha, which is 3 p.m. The whole year is 3:30. And Rabbi Yossi says you're always allowed to eat. And our Mishnah is according to Rabbi Yehuda. Right? So here comes the final piece to our puzzle. And that is text number 10. Let's read text number 10. Ryan, do you want to read text number 10? Page 97.
So
Okay, so I had to click my mic open. Miramar, some claim that it was Rav Yerma, responded, I visited the public lecture of Rav Pinkus, son of Rav Amai. There, a reciter arose and recited the same barasa in the presence of Rav Pinkus, and he accepted it. If so, we indeed have a difficulty with Rav Papa's suggestion. Rav Huna's answer is therefore most plausible.
So what does the leader come and say? The leader was one of the last final teachers, and he said, oh, I was in the study hall, and I was there when they were teaching, and they taught the second one. They taught the second brisa. And they taught it, and there was a great Rabbi Pinchas, that taught it. And nobody argued in it, and there was thousands of students there, and everyone listened to it. And they said that Rabbi Yehuda's opinion was 9 hours, not 9.5. And if that's the case, and then nobody responded, that means that the second brisa has validity. It wasn't just some teaching that someone pulled out of their pocket. Rather, this is something that was taught and discussed in the yeshiva. So we actually agree to the second brisa. We know the second brisa is true. And if that's the case, then Rabbi Yehuda's opinion is that the whole year and Passover, you're not allowed to eat from 3 p.m. And therefore, what does our Mishnah must be like? Our Mishnah must be like who? Rabbi Yossi, who says that only the holidays and Shabbat you're allowed to eat, but he says Passover for the matzah, because you want to eat the matzah and you want to enjoy the matzah, so therefore Passover you are not supposed to eat close to the afternoon. Okay? And therefore, what do we conclude with? That the Mishnah follows Rabbi Yossi. That's the conclusion. Okay, so it's quite a puzzle, and we'll just go through it very quick. You can also look at it on page 98, right? We have here, this is the screen if you want to look at it. We have the kind of between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yossi. We first start that we say you can't eat before Mincha and Passover. Who is alike? Initially we said it's like Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Yossi says you can eat the whole year just at Passover because of matzah. Then we argued back, no, maybe it's like Rabbi Yehuda, because Rabbi Yehuda he says you can't eat, and he meant you can't eat before Passover. And then we came back and says no, it's Rabbi Yossi's opinion, right? Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda's opinion doesn't hold up. Because all days start at the same time. Then we come back and we say, no, we have the brisa. So we have the second text of the brisa that might be corrupt. So Rav Papa's interpretation might hold up. And then we came back and we said, no, the second brisa is correct, and therefore it goes back to Rabbi Yossi's opinion. So this is we went back and forth, and we have our final idea. And this is a classic teaching of Talmud, the way the Talmud goes back and forth and back and forth. Now, before we finish, we have to just give you one final point. And that is, we'll finish in just a few moments. We'll go through this very quickly, the last section. But let's see here, text 11. This is a very important idea. Lori, would you like to read text 11? Press unmute.
Sorry, text 11. I'm just trying to find out what page is it?
Page 100.
Okay. For 3 years, Bet Shammai, Bet Hillel argued. These claimed the halacha, I'm not good at that, is in accordance with us, while these claimed the halacha is in accordance with us. Then a heavenly voice emerged and declared, these and these are both the words of the living God, and the halach is in accordance with the Bet Hillel.
This is a very, very important thing to understand. And that is that we have arguments in the Talmud, and we have discussions one way or another They're both true. They're both opinions of great giant rabbis. And they're both according to the 13 principles that we spoke in the first class, the way to dissect and learn the Torah. They both came from understanding the 13 principles and understanding it one way or another. Like we saw just now, you can understand Rabbi Yossi's opinion this way. You can understand Rabbi Hillel's opinion that way. You can understand Beit Shammai this way. You can understand Beit Hillel this way. They're both teachings from God, but the law always will come to one opinion that we should follow the law, which means to tell us something very important. That if someone did follow Beit Shammai, Shammai's opinion, you made the Bay blessing before the wine blessing, it's not the end of the world, right? It's not the end of the world, at least until the verdict came. Once the verdict came, you have to follow the verdict. But until the verdict came, it's not the end of the world. Why? Because they both discussed and dissected it, and it came from a true place, a place of the way God teaches us how to study Torah. But ultimately, at the end of the day, we go according to majority. Beit Hillel was the majority, and therefore we go according to their opinion most of the time. And there's other reasons, but both of them have validity, and not only have validity, but they both have something that they teach us. And that is that there's many times in the Talmud, you have discussions and arguments, and you have different ways and different opinions. There's something very important to understand. The difference of opinions, each opinion teaches us something. Each opinion teaches us a way to live and a way to connect to God. Either it could be in practical, how to do this law, or it could be, let's say someone needs a lenient opinion, you could say, oh, in this situation, I can be a little more lenient according to this rabbi and let you do it this way. Let's say someone has a dire situation. They say, this is the Jewish law. But, in the Talmud, we have a second opinion that says it, in another way, so the rabbis could be a little more lenient in unique situations. So there's importance to having different opinions in different situations. You have to be the right person to understand and know when to interpret it. But there's another point. In the mystical part of the Torah and in the teachings of the Torah, the multiple different ways also teach us different ways of connecting to God. There's one way, there's another way, and each way can teach us a different way of connecting to God. And let's do this very quick. Text 12, page 100. This is a different discussion, also on Passover, and that is, how do you get rid of chametz? On Passover, you're not allowed to have chametz, you're not allowed to have bread, any leavened food in your house. How are you supposed to get rid of it? So let's see, there is two opinions.
Rabbi Yehuda said the destruction of Hametz can be accomplished only through burning. However, the sages said that we may also crumble it and cast it into the wind or drop it into the sea.
Okay, thank you. So we have here two opinions. How to get rid of chametz. One is by actually destroying, burning it completely. The other one is by crumbling it. You could crumble it, make it into small pieces or whatever, and it gets right, and it goes away, right? So here is the important part of it. There's a great sage. His name is the Ragat Shabbat. He lived about 100 years ago. The Rebbe considered him his teacher, really a man. He never took a haircut. If you notice, I took a haircut today. Just wanted to now, but he's a very, very brilliant man. And they say once Einstein and him met, he had a brain like Einstein, or even smarter. He was really, they say, when he would walk across a room, in his mind, he studied over the whole Talmud. Every time he went from one side to the next side. And he was once learning, and a philosopher asked him, why are you studying Talmud? You should be professor. He pointed to 3 lines in Talmud. He said, in these 3 lines, there's more depth than anything you'll ever teach me and study in your Talmud. So he had a nephew that was a big professor, and he once came to him with a big mathematical question. And he gave an answer in a second. When his nephew came the next day to school, and he gave the professor the answer, he said, who taught you that? And he said, my uncle. He says, I need to meet him. And so that was the story. When the professor met the Ragat Shabbat, He said to him, "Why are you wasting your time studying Talmud? When you be a professor, you'll be the greatest professor." And he showed him this 3 lines is more brilliance than you'll ever study in all of your universities and anything. So he was a brilliant mind. And when he would answer questions, people would ask him questions, he'd write these words. He'd say, "Look here, look here, look here. And look here, look here, look here, look here, look here. Look here, there. He'd give you about 60, 70 places to look and quote you the exact pages and the exact line. And he'd say, and that's where you'll get your answer. That was a typical way he would answer. So he says on this Mishnah, he says in this discussion, he does something, he analyzes it. And he says like this: when the Torah says to destroy, the Torah says you can destroy the chametz. What does it mean destroy? Destroying, there's destroying. What is when the philosophers say destroy? Every object has its substance and has its form. He says, right? Take it for example. You have sawdust and you have lumber, right? They're both made of the molecules of wood, right? But the lumber is good for building, and the sawdust is not. If you put it into building, the whole thing will collapse. So the Rebbe says like this: Rabbi Yehuda's opinion, when he says destroy, he means literally destroy. You got to literally destroy. He says that the destruction must affect even the substance of the chametz. So therefore, he requires that the chametz should undergo a total destruction of burning. The rabbis, the sages say, their opinion is no. Once the chametz is no longer accessible to the human person for enjoying and consuming his chametz, effectively destroyed. So the chametz, you can just crumble it, you put it to the wind, you put it down the drain. And that's actually the law is that you don't have to burn it. You could flush it down the toilet. You can throw it into the ocean. Whatever you want, you do. Okay. You could say that's of course right. But let's say you don't have a dental at the shelter, right? That's what we're saying, right? So now, who's right? Which opinion is right? So as I said, the law is a majority, the rabbis, but nevertheless, there's a lesson to learn from both. What's the lesson to learn from both? Both. Chametz represents our negative influences in our life. The question is, how do you eliminate negative influences? And there's 2 approaches. There's 2 different ways to do it. Let's say a teenager is associating himself with a negative group. Well, a parent will tell the teenager, disassociate yourself from them. Get away from them. Destroy them totally. Don't keep them in your midst. Don't be around them. Get different friends. Don't be with them. Total, utter destruction. But when you get a little older, it can be a little more reliable, and you're around people that are not the best influence. What's the best way to deal with that? You don't have to burn them. You don't have to destroy them. You have to just take them and their negativity and crumble it and dissect it and take away their negativity. Work with them and flush it down. So take the wood and turn it into sawdust, right? The point is that there's what you can learn from both opinions in our personal day-to-day life. So there's 2 opinions. Each one gives us a different way of a guiding way in our day-to-day life. Like this, you can learn every single section of Talmud, of Torah. And even if there's 2 opinions, each one has a lesson for us, because ultimately each one came from the Word of God, and each one teaches us and guides us how to learn. So as we conclude today's lesson, we're able to dissect a Mishnah. First of all, understand the questions. If you remember the beginning, when we dissected it in a brief way, the 5 different points and many different questions that we had at each point, and what the Gemara brought about all those points. And then we took one part and we went through the sugya of the Talmud on it, the whole back and forth and back and forth. And then we showed how even if there's 2 different opinions, each one could teach us a message in the way we can live our lives. Even though the law could be like one, but there's ways that we could study and we can learn our life lessons from both opinions. And for that, we conclude today's lesson. And God willing, next week we will jump into what is the Talmud, who wrote the Talmud. We'll study some of the great rabbis from the Talmud, Hillel and Shammai and Abaye and Rava, Rav Ashi, Ravina, and we're going to be able to learn much about what is the history of the Talmud, and also the Agadata, the different medrash ideas that the Talmud tells us, stories and other very interesting parts of Talmud. And with that, we conclude today's lesson. I want to thank everyone for joining us, and it was an honor. Again, I apologize if you're watching on the recording on the video. It might not be the same as last week's. We have both computers working, but I hope you'll enjoy it, and we'll see you soon.